Health Tech listeners, I'm your host this week, Justine Abson. This is the podcast where we tackle some of the trending topics, ideas and best practice in health and social care. This week we're speaking to Sarah Adams, Senior Project Manager at Radar Healthcare. Sarah's been with Radar Healthcare for 4.5 years and she focuses on implementing Radar Healthcare to help our customers achieve their strategic ambitions. Outside of work, Sarah is mostly occupied by her son, Artie, who's 5. But if there is any spare time, she enjoys gardening and looking after her chickens. Chickens, Sarah. I'm impressed with that.
I already sound like a crazy chicken lady, don't I?
Sarah, welcome to What the Health Tech.
Hi, thank you for having me. It is lovely to be here, but really weird. I just said to you earlier before we started filming, the microphone is so close to my mouth. Yeah, it's really alien to me. This is my first time.
Excellent. I'm glad to have you here. So we're going to talk about, today we're going to have a bit of a chat about the highs and lows of project implementation, where the main focuses should be, what's important to think about in the early stages, and I guess later down the line as well. It's not we don't stop as soon as that project's implemented. So to start with, it'd be really good if you can give our listeners a brief overview of what's involved in your role as a project manager at Radar Healthcare.
Yeah, sure. So it starts with the sales team. Obviously, they get the sale, they get the signature on the contract, they do all the finance bit of it, and then it gets handed over to me. And I will chat to those sales guys and have an introduction with the customer for the first time. We'll lead on to a kick-off meeting, kicking off their project. And then in turn, we sort of have a modular approach to the implementation of Radar, so the different modules, events, audits, business compliance and workforce compliance, and we'll gradually work through those, kicking off each of those modules and training them and supporting them with how to configure their system in order to achieve those outcomes, which is a very practical response, I think. What sort of surrounds that practical thing is making sure that all of that work that we do to configure the system is in line with their strategy, their vision, their objectives, what they actually want to achieve and why they bought Radar.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's actually something that Mark Harrison and Rob Place spoke about a few weeks ago when we talked about the partnership approach, in particular about those ambitions. Yeah. And Mark in particular is very passionate about getting that why across, which I think all builds into our partnership approach, really.
Yeah, it's important. It's one of the most important things. If Radar isn't working for you, then it's not working, is it?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously going into that, we know every organisation is different, especially in health and social care, if nowhere else. Yeah. And it's something we pride ourselves on in terms of we never go out with a one-size-fits-all approach. That is, one thing that we're really, really passionate about. So as a project manager, how do you kick off that implementation with a new partner? What is kind of the key things that are really important at that point?
Well, practical things to start with, what have they actually purchased? What's the scope of the project? Any timescales or sort of risk associated with it? If they're leaving an old system or stopping, they've got to stop paying for an old system and Radar's coming in, then those deadlines and feeding those in, and working that backwards to some sort of practical solutions, really. And everybody has different risks or different timescales or a different agenda or a different vision. So it's just incorporating that into your plan practically, but also making sure to keep relating back to things and talking about it and just sort of reminding people, okay, well, what we wanted to achieve with this was X. So how are we doing that? Is this on target for that?
Yeah, and you mentioned in that, whether it's leaving a previous system, a legacy system, or whether it's starting from scratch. A lot of our care home providers, they will have been paper-based and transforming to digital. So I guess even that is completely different, whether you're leaving that legacy system and transforming over, or whether you are starting from scratch as well. Yeah,
yes, you're right. And obviously the vision is different depending on where they are in the maturity of them using systems and their processes in place. And I think that feeds into the culture of the organisation. Everyone is different, and it doesn't matter how large or small they are. There are some relatively small or new organisations sort of that we partner with, our customers, that think big. and they're going for a more strategic goal, not better outcomes, but different outcomes to those that maybe don't have any systems, just on paper. The main thing for those kind of customers is, I just want visibility of what's going on. I have no idea what's going on in my care homes. It's all on bits of paper, it's in filing cabinets, I can't lay my hands on it. I have no idea what's going on. So, that's a common one. That is a common one.
And it's actually crazy to think that, isn't it? The more I kind of hear that is happening, and the amount of compliance that care providers have to go through, with CQC and everything else, it must be an absolute nightmare when someone comes in if you are paper-based.
Yeah, and it is surprising. It's not just your less mature customers that are doing it. Some really big customers are still in that position, So there isn't one size fits all. It's not like I know if I have an organisation this big, this is what I've got to aim for, this is what they're doing. If I've got an organisation that's smaller, this big, then these are their motivators, It is just different. Everyone is different.
Yeah, and it really does come down to that partnership approach in terms of, like you said, everybody's different, regardless of size or anything else as well. So with that in mind, have you got any examples of anything that has been done exceptionally well, which might help other organisations to consider when planning their implementation?
Yes. And I was speaking to one of my customers recently. I often find my customers are inspiring. I really enjoy doing my job. I enjoy speaking to our customers because they give me insights into what they're doing. I enjoy having that trust and that relationship with them. Anyway, so I won't say who it is, but there's a lady I work with, and she's doing a fantastic job implementing Radar, and her method of doing it is, we obviously configure it together, I train her, and then she has arranged sessions with her practice managers, and she makes it a day out. She makes it the Radar day. And all the practice managers, she has a couple of them they're all across the country, and she groups them all together, and she'll have a training day. We've provided her with a few goodie bags and stuff to support her in that. She's invited her marketing team along, and she's making a day out of it, and a big thing to really get people bought in and excited about Radar. And she follows that up. I mean, it's brilliant. She was just telling me the other day, she's got a couple of staff that work for her as well. And one of her goals, one of her visions that she wanted to do was have visibility. And visibility is great. And you get there automatically sort of with having Radar. It's sort of easy for me to make sure, I do my part of the job. But what good is it if nobody's looking at it, Yeah. So as she said, actually she's supported by these other two ladies it's part of their role to log on to Radar every day and just have that oversight. They're not responsible for doing investigations or necessarily creating action plans or completing action plans or whatever it is, but they are a little bit distanced from it and just make sure that it's all going smoothly. And if it isn't, they're questioning it and doing something about it. And I think that's the golden bit, that's the bit on the top of the icing on the cake, as it were, to just realise that last bit of the benefits that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually, having a couple of people that have that visibility but are just sort of almost analysing it and looking at going, actually, why isn't anybody doing X?
Yeah.
When to someone that isn't looking at it every day, it's obvious sort of thing. I think that's a really interesting approach, actually. And I think it's these types of things that, are great to hear, because we can share those with our other customers and obviously our listeners on platforms like this as well.
Yeah.
I think it's that implementation side does definitely show that different things work for different people. I've spoken to some customers recently for when we've been talking about case studies, and we've got one who has implemented a module at a time, very kind of planned pilot system, And then we've got another that I talked to a couple of weeks ago that just was like, no, actually, I want everything at once.
Yeah.
And that's how it works for us.
Yeah.
So, prime examples of how that different approach works for different people as well.
Yeah, and everyone's different. And, that's my job to just adapt to that. And I make recommendations based on experiences in the past and what's worked well and what's not. But yeah, we're there to adapt and not force people to do it a certain way because everyone's different.
Yeah, and I think that, we've talked about kind of the good stuff. So I'm guessing you've probably got plenty of organisations that, maybe haven't done things quite as well, especially at the beginning. So have you got any kind of experience of what doesn't work so well?
Yeah, so I'll just say a couple just off the top of my head. Well, she says glancing at her notes. So I think one thing is really following through with your thought processes to see where that's going to end, where that's going to land you. It's so easy to get bogged down in the actual process of doing something or implementing something that you don't have the foresight to see the impact of that. So I'll give you an example. One of my customers carry out a root cause analysis on an incident if it's a certain trigger level, if it's they rate it in levels. So, if it was a high level, that's cause for a root cause analysis. But if it's sort of a low level incident, then that's not. And those levels that dictate if there should be a root cause analysis are up to the business, really. It's their incident, it's up to them, and Radar is flexible to adapt that and put those triggers in. So the question is, what level of care, what level of safety is appropriate to warrant or justify doing that root cause analysis? And they sort of played with it a bit. We'll start with what it used to be. Actually, we want to be safer. We want to put more triggers in. We want to trigger it sooner for cases that aren't so serious. And they sort of moved it. And the impact of that was actually the person responsible for carrying out the root cause analysis, they had lots more work.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. You might have thought, well, it's going to create more work. Not quite sure how much work, but actually this was a lot more work. And everything was just going overdue. The regional managers, they couldn't keep up. So I think just sitting down and just thinking is difficult to do. I fall foul of it myself as well. You don't forget that end, forget what you're aiming for, and forgetting the impact or what might happen with doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's, that is a really good example of, that is a great idea in sort of theory.
Yeah.
But if that can't be followed through,
yeah,
it's never going to work. So it's almost that thinking about, well, actually, this is good, but how do we actually get to that point of why we're doing it, basically?
And the impact on the business of these decisions. And just, it's easy to change it in Radar, but it's not just about Radar.
Yeah, it's about the people that are actually using the system, I guess, isn't it? The people that are on the front line as well.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to overlook that and think it's a system. I know how to put systems in,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's more than that. It's a mindset. It's a cultural shift. It's driving towards those goals and those objectives again. So.
Yeah, the communication, obviously, as well. Communication in the business itself. Yeah. Communication in general needs to be very much two-way, especially at implementation stage. So how important is it to have, we've touched on partnership already in the podcast, but how important is it to have those really transparent conversations that, at the very beginning and then throughout the process? I can't imagine they're always the easiest conversations to have, but I imagine they're pretty important.
I love it. This is the best bit of my job because I struggle to be anything other than that. It is the way I am. And I think a lot of the team are as well, that that work at Radar, that is something I think we pride ourselves on at Radar, just being honest. I can't stand not being honest, to be honest. So yeah, I think it's just how you deliver that, just having empathy and seeing it from the customer's point of view as well as the Radar point of view, presenting options for things and making recommendations based on that. So yeah, I am super honest with my customers. They'll know.
And that's a great way to be as well, for a company that does pride itself on partnership and, making sure people get the best out of the system for them. The only way to do that is to have those challenging conversations sometimes. And it's, at the end of the day, we are the experts in the system in terms of which ways we can go. That an organisation might come to us and sort of say, this is what we need and we just want to do it this way. But, if you've got experience of another similar customer that's done it in a slightly different way that works better, then that's part of that approach, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's ultimately up to them. I can only present the options and make the recommendations. But I think the more open and transparent and honest you are as you progress through your journey together, the more trust you build. And, it's all about that. It's key.
Yeah, it's building that relationship, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
It becomes a trust thing.
Yeah.
So obviously you've worked with partners of all different sizes. I think, again, we've touched on it. So when it comes to engaging those at the front who use Radar Healthcare, do you find there's a different approach depending on size or type of organisation, or does it just come down to literally the individuals?
Oh, well, the fear of repeating myself. It's not one size fits all. So, you just work with the organisation to see what resources they have, what skills they have, what time they have, what schedules they have, and we just build from there, really. I mean, we have a trainer approach. We have a communication and launch meeting fairly early on in the project, and we talk about training in that as well. And our general approach is train the trainer. So the organisation is responsible for cascading it down, and that works well in a lot of cases. But sometimes, we'll have customers that come to us and say, I can't do that, I don't have the resources to do that, and that's fine too. We'll deliver their end user training for them, or help them with resources. Or I think Hayley's even talking about doing a marketing piece with one of my new customers that's coming on to just help communicate launches. And it's not one size fits all. We'll do whatever they need, really, within reason.
I think that's really interesting though, because there are so many different elements involved in this. So it isn't just simply you've got your project manager and you look after the customer and then that's it almost. There's a lot of different approaches to kind of engagement, and from training to, like you said, marketing pieces, communication. There's so much involved in it. And I think for teams working together as well, that is where teamwork basically comes into it. Everybody has their own areas of expertise, but actually, when you look at a customer's journey, there's lots of things that help that implementation be a success. Yeah,
definitely. That collaboration is key.
Yeah, and I think something else we often hear a lot about is, what happens after the implementation is complete. In an ever-evolving sector such as healthcare, it feels even more important because we all know how quickly things change. Something that's happening now doesn't mean that, it's going to be the same in 6 months' times. So how do we ensure that we continue that partnership once that implementation is complete almost? So I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but you've said you've had an interview with Rob and Mark Harrison, and there are several others as well. Customer success managers are also part of that initial team with a customer, and their job is to be with the customer for their life at Radar. Whereas
unfortunately, I'm just for Christmas, not for life. So, I will do the project, and I will make sure that we're building the product to meet their sort of vision and goals. And it's really the likes of Mark and the rest of the CSM team that are there with the customer the whole way through, the whole journey, to ensure that that is maintained. And when new staff come in and they've got new ideas, or you need to change a process or something, how we support them with that, and how that still aims towards their goals, or if their goals change, and how we can support them with that. It's continuous.
Yeah, and the customer success managers get involved sort of in the project side as well, don't they? So it's not just about them coming in at the end of it's not a handover as such. No. It's they have been involved in that process and have understood what the customer's gone through to then obviously then take them on the rest of their journey, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's just two of us who you will have direct contact with throughout your project. I mean, there's a whole sort of other team in the background that's going on. You've got your support team, we've got our development team, and depending on what you've got in your contract or the scope of your project, we're going to draw on those people as well. Marketing as well. Yeah. We try to make those introductions and get people coming on here and things like that.
And it's great as well, I talk to a lot of customers in my role, and it's always fantastic to speak to them because, for us, it's great hearing their positive feedback and about the different teams. And it is amazing how many different teams they do mention when we chat to them, which is usually more towards, once they're in, they're using the system. So, I think you all do a great job on that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about different insights. So I'm just keen to know if there's any other advice that you would offer our listeners from your experience. So any top tips, anything we've not covered, anything that you kind of think that our listeners that might be starting on their journey of implementation, what would be your top tip?
I think just keep it simple. Just in the first instance, try and keep it simple. Take advantage of the toolkits and the templates that we have available in Radar, and don't overcomplicate it. You can end up tying yourself in knots with things. So, keep it simple.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? It's really easy to get really excited sometimes about all of this amazing stuff that something can do. But actually, if you start with the simple bit, you can get to that bit. You can get to you can
build on it. It's not like a start and stop thing. You don't, right, this is it, it's done. It can evolve, and that's, why you have the customer success manager along your journey, because nothing is static. Nothing's going to stay the same forever. It's going to change.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier in the podcast about the visibility with one of your customers, and them having people in place to just oversee things. And I think that's where you look at things like analytics and building your bespoke reports, and that's almost where that bit comes from then as the next step, I think, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so it's all well and good sort of just getting Radar in and doing that, but what you really want to be looking at is how timely am I doing things? Like, how safe am I? How caring am I? Your Chloe things and your things that the CQC are looking for, and what's driving that? What are those objectives, and drilling down into that underneath to make that happen? Is it doing more root cause analysis? Is that how I'm more caring? Is that how I provide a better, safer quality of care?
I think it's really interesting because every sort of whenever we chat about things like this, it comes down to the objectives, the why, that's always the thing that underpins it. I think to get to that, basically that outcome to improve patient safety, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah. That golden thread.
So at the end of every episode, we ask everybody the same question. We like to know a bit about what the health tech moment is. So it's a bit of fun. We talk to lots of people across the industry, so it's all about hearing your weird and wonderful stories of health and social care, or even a life-changing moment in terms of something that's had an impact on you. So what's your what the health tech moment?
It's like the dreaded question this at the end, isn't it? I've done a little bit of prep, but I have tried to think about this already. I used to work in Kuwait. I had a project in Kuwait working for the Ministry of Health. And when I went out to Kuwait, I'd never had an experience of working in healthcare abroad, but it's so different. It really is so different. Just the culture and the availability of healthcare. Who I don't know who sort of allowed that healthcare. I can't think of a better word, but different categories of people are entitled to different levels of care, and I thought that was interesting. You take for granted that the NHS is always there for you and it's free, and that's brilliant. So yeah, it kind of made me reflect on that and just grateful for the NHS, really. And not only that, I mean, just the whole culture of it. They specialised in referring patients abroad for treatment that they couldn't provide in Kuwait or didn't have the expertise, and that was funded. That's amazing. But the process for doing it, patients would come into the sort of referral centre. They're not seeing doctors or not receiving treatment or anything. They would come in and crowd round the reception to try and this is my paperwork. Why isn't it going through faster? When am I going to Germany for my care?
Wow.
And it was crazy. It was crazy in that referrals department. So yeah, that was really fun to see that.
It must have been a really interesting place to actually go and work over there as well, and just see that completely different lifestyle. Yeah, absolutely it was. And just their setup and all sort of, their offices and the seniority, and it was literally you could draw on a map the process around the office, that the paperwork, it was all paperwork. Paperwork just went all around the office. It was so funny. Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. I think it's great to kind of hear about other cultures and things like that, and it does kind of bring you back to we are very lucky to have our NHS. We had a podcast earlier where we were talking about a midwife that had stayed with someone above her shift because she wanted to kind of see that, see it through almost. So yeah,
exactly.
Very
it's
lucky.
All free.
I know, very lucky indeed. So thank you very much, Sarah. Really enjoyed having you on this week, and thank you to everybody for listening. Next week we're going to hear from Jonathan Alsop. Jonathan is Quality and Information Security Manager at Radar Healthcare, and we'll be talking about the importance of information security. Don't forget to rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you have any questions for us or our guests, please email whatthehealthtech@radarhealthcare.com.